And then you've got all the economical and things that impact the way that you eat, right? The price of food, availability, those types of things. So when you look at that entire landscape, it's like, how can you take one individual person and not think that they have to have a personalized approach, because your needs are going to be different from the next needs. They're different from probably a family member's needs.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Inside Out Alignment Show, episode 11. Today on the show, we have nutritionist Sarah Marjoram with us. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her background. With a career spanning over 2 decades, today's guest is a food and nutrition consultant who's been in the forefront of driving change and transformation within the food and beverage industry. With an extensive background as a registered dietitian and a master's in nutrition science, Sarah brings unparalleled technical expertise to the table. She's been the driving force behind innovation, regulatory compliance, and personalization solutions for numerous renowned food and beverage brands. But what truly sets her apart is her unique ability to fuse her knowledge of nutrition with an intricate understanding of consumer behavior. By leveraging these insights, she crafts strategies that not only enhance customer experience and loyalty, but drive sales through effective communication and innovation. Now, Sarah and I share a common client, and that's how we got introduced. She's very personable. She's very relatable, very insightful, and it's just a pleasure to speak to her. So I'm hoping you're going to really enjoy this conversation. So let's meet Sarah. Well, hi, Sarah. How are you doing this morning?
Fantastic.
That's
Thank you.
great.
How are you?
Really, really good. So I did the introduction previously, so we'll just jump right into the questions. And again, Sarah and I have a common client, and that's how we got introduced. And we have a pretty aligned passion around health and wellness and behavior change, among other things. I think those were some of the main topics that we kind of had shared interest in. But one of the first questions I wanted to start off is, from your perspective as a nutritionist and working not only with corporations, but some clients, individuals, what are the health trends that you're seeing, whether it's macro or dietary? Like, what are you seeing when it comes to the health world these days?
Yeah, there's a lot of exciting stuff going on. I would say, first and foremost, and it's been a trend for a bit, and I think it's still going strong and will continue to, is everything plant-based, right? Like, not only different, protein alternative plant-based options, but also people's focus on eating more plants, i.e., fruits, vegetables, nuts, grains, seeds, legumes. So that's really great to see. I would also say there's a real big emphasis on protein, and people are seeking out ways in which they can add more protein to their diet throughout the day. That probably ties into an emphasis on an understanding around macros and the macronutrients, the balance between people's protein to carbohydrate to fat, and kind of how those different macronutrients function within the body. And therefore, that understanding has led to more deliberate choice around protein options. I think broadly, like, at least in the course of my career, it's just the understanding among consumers that food is directly tied to your health and how you're going to feel. And 9 times out of 10, any goal that you're trying to achieve in terms of wellness and health, and they're informed. Consumers are informed, and a lot of the work that I do is making sure that they're informed and with accurate information. But it's exciting because there's a lot of opportunity for positive impact.
Well, let's then transition what you spoke about in terms of macros, and that's protein. And so we were together a few months back, and I kind of made a comment about how I believe FDA has really been understating protein requirements. Now, I don't want to be so bold as to say to what degree or what level, but can you talk a little bit about protein and why it is becoming more important that we understand and consume, probably different amounts than we were previously told we should?
Yeah, and I think this is a really important topic. I think first and foremost, just to level set, like, somebody's protein requirements, um, first of all, are completely individualized, right? And they're based on a host of things, everything from genetics, age, gender, body composition, activity level. I would even go as far as to say the goals that they're trying to achieve, right? Um, And so you have all these inputs that are gonna come together and create your need. So historically, the recommendation has always been kind of 0.8, so 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. And those were used as a guide, and they were based upon a certain population and what it required for them, what protein requirement was successful for them to not go into like breaking down their body's protein, right? I don't want to get too technical with it, but it was sort of like the baseline amount required for that population of people. And what we now know that the study and the recommendations were based upon. What we now know and understand much better, and will continue to understand because such is science, that those maybe don't translate to everybody, and they don't translate to they're not broadly as accurately applied as maybe we had hoped. So I think they're a good baseline, but I think as you get into it, you have to approach protein and the requirements, and again, it's much more of a personalized situation. So I do think that we have erred on the lower side, particularly in aging populations and people, who might be more physically active, particularly with strength training and those types of activities. But I think it's important to kind of understand even broadly with it, like with any nutrition recommendation, when you're compiling a recommendation, you have to pull together and do things and yes, it's good sort of baseline. Here's a starting point, but I think you always have to take it a step further, particularly if you have a goal in mind that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, so I'm going to share a quick clip here, and we're going to nerd out a little bit on anabolic and catabolic states because I've been a big proponent of longevity and health span.
Maximum protein usability or assimilation in a given sitting. So I'll tell you where I come at this. So one of the challenges that I've observed in taking care of patients is when they get into a very heavy regimen of time-restricted feeding. So you're probably aware of this, Don, but there are ideas that say, look, if you can just limit the amount of time that you eat, but not place any limits on what you eat or how much you eat or what you're eating from, into this sort of intermittent fasting window, it produces some health benefits. And it's certainly an effective way to reduce calories. So if the goal of the exercise is to reduce total energy expenditure and you create a narrow enough window, you will indeed do that. But what we've seen repeatedly is people who, after say 6 months of adopting a very narrow feeding window, say 1 meal a day, will lose weight, but disproportionately will lose lean tissue. And so the diagnosis here is pretty straightforward, right? They clearly reduced energy intake, but they probably reduced protein intake too much. And so body composition actually got worse despite the fact that weight went down. Which then gets to a point, which is, well, can't you just eat all of your protein in one meal? So if a person says, I'm just going to eat 1 meal a day, and let's just say this is a very active person, right? So they're going to eat 3,000 calories in one sitting, which I will raise my hand to saying I can do that quite easily. I'm quite a glutton. Even if I was able to eat 150 grams of protein in one sitting, is it clear that my body will get the benefit from that it would if I ate 50 grams 3 times a day?
Yeah, it's quite clear that you won't get a benefit, that there is a limit. So now we need to think about the body as muscle versus everything else.
So we're going back to the muscle-centered view that I like.
Yeah. You're probably sensing a theme with me at this point. The muscle, there's a lot of data now that muscle can handle protein meals for an optimum anabolic response between about 25 and maybe 60 grams. Okay. So then you start getting into distribution. If you think if you're going to have 150 grams per day, how should you distribute it? One of my pet peeves in nutrition, I'm slightly getting off track here, is people refer to protein as a percentage of calories. Protein is not a percentage of calories. Protein is an absolute number.
Don Layman is this PhD, and his whole world is basically around protein synthesis, absorption in the body, usability, how that translates to muscle. And his view and his research has shown that if you consume protein in less than 25 gram increments, you remain in a catabolic state. And so I would, be fully transparent. I was fasting for the last 7-8 years, where I was only eating in like a 5 to 6 hour window. And I was having a hard time putting on muscle mass, despite working out. So I stopped that. I started going to this 25 to 60, and my sweet spot's like 40 to 50 grams per meal. For me, it's 4 times a day. And sure enough, it was almost like a light switch had been flipped, and my whole physiology started to change. And I actually noticed some gains. So his other comment was about not as a percent of your diet, but like absolute. So it's like total grams, because it is this anabolic, catabolic kind of teeter-totter that you're on, that if you're less than 25 grams, you remain in catabolic. If you're more than 25 up to 60, then that's anabolic, and it's generally good. So not getting in too much of the weeds on this, because this is really getting into the weeds and nerding out on it. But do you have any thoughts on what you heard him say as it relates to your thoughts on protein?
Yeah, I do think, particularly a person's like mid-30s and older, like I think that is probably the core of where the underestimation has happened, because all these other lifestyle inputs that make it like maybe more likely to not maintain lean body mass, in terms of being more sedentary or busy or whatever. I would say from that point on, there is a case for making sure that you're upping your protein intake from what we used to recommend. I've seen the number like 30 grams per meal. And I think it's also important to note that in the American diet, 9 times out of 10, what is being overeaten is processed carbohydrates. So like if you're looking at the overarching diet and macros, if you will, I would say that it's a pretty safe bet that if somebody's looking to either achieve a goal, reduce their weight, lower their fat content, I would have to say to them, okay, let's cut out some of your carbs, because almost always that's what people overeat. People aren't overeating really protein and or healthy fats.
And I think your point and what you were kind of talking around was the next question that I have is around personalization. It's so true. Like any diet can work for anybody. There is no one diet that works for everybody, right? That's what I've learned in my 30 years of being into this nutrition world, is what works is what works for you. And then you measure your blood markers, and you do your measurements on your body and all sorts of other metrics, but ultimately results will dictate what works. So when someone says keto, paleo, carnivore, plant-based, vegan, it's like, I was vegan for 3 years and pre-diabetic. It's like, it didn't work for me, but so there's no one size fits all. So talk a little bit about your experience and how important personalization is when it comes to developing a nutrition plan for your clients.
Yeah, so when you think about, and this is where I kind of geek out. It's like, when you think about the choices that somebody makes, or the impact that their food or their food and drinks have on their body and their health, there are so many things, right? You've got the biological sort of starting point. So that's things like your genetics, your age, your health, your body composition, you go into the lifestyle component. So you've got like just your activity level, maybe your religious preferences or things that dictate the way that you eat in that way. Or maybe you identify as a vegan or whatever, and you've got these sort of just lifestyle choices, the ways in which you eat. And then you've got all the economical and things that impact the way that you eat, right? The price of food, availability, those types of things. So when you look at that entire landscape, it's like, how can you take one individual person and not think that they have to have a personalized approach? Because your needs are going to be different from the next needs. They're different from probably a family member's needs, So what makes this really cool today is, I would say, all of the bubbling technology around it, right? Like we have a lot of ways, whether it be personal trackers for exercise, there's a lot of technology bubbling up around, yeah, personal metrics that kind of help inform the impact of what you're doing so that you can then make better decisions. So when you look at whether it's on the singular level or on a client level, or a food and beverage brand who's looking to better meet their clients' needs or their guests' needs, if you're not personalizing in some capacity, you're going to lose. Like you have to start thinking about it, because there is no one size fits all approach. There is nothing that is going to blanket work for everybody. And thankfully, today we have a lot of ways that we can kind of learn and grow and continue to do better in terms of helping people reach their goals.
And I think just let's kind of turn the page here quickly as it relates to what you and I do on a daily basis. So we deal with business to business. We're, in the corporate world, we have clients, restaurant chains, if you will. And I think as you talk about personalization and mass customization, I think it's really important that restaurants are able to operationalize themselves in a way that makes customization easy, because we've all gone to a restaurant. Can I tweak this? Can I tweak that? Well, let me go ask the chef, or let me go. It's kind of a challenge. But if your operation model is designed for that kind of ease of use, you think of like Subway or a Chipotle, it's designed for you to really pick and choose, but not necessarily, not every restaurant is designed to have that flexibility. So do you agree that it's really important when it comes to the restaurant side of the business that you have to build in that operational robustness to customize?
Yeah, 100%. And there's a lot of it really starts at the core with like the building out your menu, right? Because the things that you put on it have to be in some fashion personalizable, right? Speaking to the operations. And then really thinking through how it's presented to the guest, whether that's through the brick and mortar, experience where they walk in and they see it, like the likes of a Chipotle or a Moe's or whatever, where they're, able to go through and build it as they go. It might be just building out things from an operational standpoint where there's you can get this build and either put this protein, or this protein in it.
Yeah.
And then carrying that all the way through in terms of how menu items and ingredients are communicated. So you're thinking about how they're presented on the menu. Today, core focuses should be in digital and how you're presenting that information to guests, whether it be through an app or on the web, or a third-party delivery service. So all those things, I think right now, and then layer on COVID, right, where we've gotten through, and now everybody's familiar with digital and ordering that way and having their food delivered and having their groceries delivered. Like, as a brand, that should be a focus. And how do we do that better? But at the base of it, and that from, it's really, can it be executed at the operational level? And that takes a lot of strategy and expertise around, making things feasible back of house, while at the same time appealing to your guest.
We're going to touch on some restaurant trends too towards the end of our discussion. I wanted to talk also about goals and goal setting, and this kind of follows the discussion around personalization, right? So you've got personalization. What does that look like? But then also, what are the goals? Like you said, is it to maintain? Is it to optimize? Is it to improve in certain areas? And so I think it's so important to have someone like yourself that has not only the discipline of nutrition, but understands, and we're going to talk about this next, human behavior and behavior change. So let's go back a little bit to goals and goal setting. Just talk to me briefly, probably more from a perspective of probably an individual client, but maybe then into the restaurant industry. How important is goal setting? And then I always say goal getting. It's one thing to set a goal, it's another thing to get the goal. So talk a little bit about that.
To me, goals are like a long-term, right? And that might mean it's a long-term ambition. So whether it's I'm trying to run a 5K, or I want to put on 5 pounds of muscle, or I want to lose 10 pounds of weight, whatever it is. So you've got that, and you want to, there's something that you're trying to achieve. And then you develop objectives around that goal, which sort of break it down into more of the behavior components of like, okay, these are things that I'm going to execute to walk myself closer to said goal. I think goal setting is really important, but I do think it has to be done in a way, and there has to be awareness and self-awareness around creating the behavior change and the action that doesn't overwhelm and lead you to failure. So it's really important to break it down into those digestible kind of pieces and understand that it is a process. Nothing is going to work overnight. It does take commitment. It does take grace, right? You're not going to be successful every single day, and that's totally fine. And, I know when I was working with clients, they'd come in all beat up about, oh, I did XYZ, I blew it, and I would always say to them, do you really think you can blow it all in one day? Like, it's not that simple, right? So giving yourself grace to still be a human being and move forward with the continued intention that you're working towards something, that as long as you do the little behavior changes throughout every day, and maybe if you don't even do all of them, but maybe you do a handful of them, that you're one step closer.
Yeah. So let's transition to exactly what you talked about, and that's human behavior change, your self-image, how you view yourself. You're the type of person who self-talk. I talk a lot about this, on a lot of my content, is this idea of holding kind of three things at once. It's self-talk, it's self-image, and it's self-efficacy, right? So self-image, I'm the type of person who self-talk, the stories we tell ourselves. Self-efficacy, our ability to believe that we can do a thing, right? We could get something done, right? Those three things are really important. And then in the background kind of needs to be this, what I call purposeful optimism. So it's not just like optimism for optimism's sake, but it's like I'm optimistic for very specific reasons. And then self-love, because self-love is a verb. And if you don't love yourself, you're not going to take action. But let's talk a little bit about behavior change, and how do you, because you as a nutritionist have so much knowledge about the technical side of things. But what I think, and I've got other nutritionist friends who tell me the reason they feel they're successful is they have this ability to relate and empathize and understand human behavior. I don't know that that's a very common trait of a nutritionist, having that human behavior element. So talk a little bit about, what goes on between the ears when you're talking to clients.
In our training, like it's very much rooted in the psychology of change, right? And behavior change. So really tuning into the person, and then wherever they are there's something called the stages of change, right? The behavior stages of change. So somebody may not even, those stages are like the progression of you start with, I'm not even aware that I want to change. And you end up with, I've changed, or like, I'm ready, right? I'm doing it, I'm action. So I think it's really tuning in and understanding, number one, where the person is in that journey, and then leaning in with the techniques and the strategies that push them along the course. So it starts with awareness, and then you move into sort of a window of either creating motivation, or if maybe they're already there, you're kind of propelling motivation, and then ending up with providing like actionable support and techniques and skills, and pushing them along that path that gets them to ultimate change. And it's not linear, and there's like little ups and downs and ebbs and flows. But I think where dietitians and nutritionists come in is like, our training is in that specifically, right? And it's the behavior change of food and beverage choices. And that is kind of the niche that I think is sometimes overlooked in terms of the skill sets that somebody like myself and colleagues bring to the table, because it's behavior change, but it's like it's sort of the niche of the behavior change of the food and beverage client, whether that's at the individual level and the impact that we can have in counseling individuals and clients, whether it be in the health setting or the wellness setting, or it's really, really cool to see, because going back to what we talked about a minute ago, it's like that you have, like, if I look at you and I say, okay, let's look at all these impacts. If I'm counseling you, let's think about all the things that impact what you decide to put in your body on a daily basis. And it's going to be different every day. And it's going to be changed from year to year. And it's never the same, but it's equipping somebody with the tools for them to do the best they can most of the time, their goals are and what their needs are in terms of optimizing their own health and wellness.
So let's transition to the restaurant side of things. Trends you've seen. We've talked a little bit about macro and protein, but maybe big picture as you're dealing with your chain restaurant clients. What are there themes you're seeing from the business side of it that you want to share with the group and insights you might have?
Yeah, I would say there's always going to be like a need in America for convenience to some extent, but where, again, with this more informed consumer who's sort of, it's where better for you is now sort of mainstream, that convenience has to offer better for you choices. Tons with personalization and different opportunities to do that. And then I would also say sort of functional nutrition, like
Yes.
people aren't going, they're expecting their food to work for them in some capacity. So they want to go in and say,
I want to have focus. So like theanine and lion's mane's mushroom. So you've got this adaptogens and all sorts of things that help calm the body, focus the body. Like that's my world that I kind of live in. I have my own little drink that I make every morning that's got like a list of like 20 ingredients that help me really stay focused. Is that kind of what we're talking about here?
yeah, like going in, or like, I want to feel powered up today. Maybe that's just as simple as like your mainstream. How do I add some protein to this, right?
Right.
But also, I want to kind of calm my mind. What are things I can, like, what do you have to offer me that? And it's a tricky landscape to navigate
Yeah.
within the restaurant industry, because there's a lot of regulatory considerations that have to be worked through in terms of claims, meeting people's needs, but also being truthful and honest and saying things that are responsible.
Yeah, I think that's where we're headed. I have a friend of mine who's been in the beverage industry for 30 years, and he's seeing some shifts because let's face it, in the past, in the beverage industry, it's been around alcohol base, caffeine base, or sugar base. Like that's basically the beverage industry for the last 100 years, and that's shifting. And so you want to be
Yeah.
ahead of that from a beverage standpoint. So, well, listen, Sarah, it's been awesome. I know as we talked, I was thinking I want to go there with her. I want to go, and kind of talk more and in depth. So we'll schedule another call down the road, but it's been a pleasure talking to you. For those chain restaurants, business to business folks that want to learn more about working with you from a strategy and nutrition standpoint, where is the best way they can reach you?
I would say LinkedIn.
That's great. And one thing I will just say, you can tell through this interview, Sarah's very personable. She's not only wicked smart and has a lot of experience, but she's very easy to talk to and engage with. So I think for any corporations that may want to work with someone like Sarah, not only does she have the technical skills, she's just a pleasure to work with. So Sarah, thanks so much for the generosity of your time. It was awesome. And I look forward to doing this again.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. I appreciate the opportunity so much.
All right. Take care, Sarah.
You too.